Smoke rises from towering chimneys, machines hum relentlessly, and assembly lines stretch as far as the eye can see. This is the face of modern China, but it wasn't always this way. Just a few decades ago, the landscape was different, the economy fragile, and the industries nearly non-existent. How did China leap from rural farmlands to becoming the world's factory? What strategies fueled this rapid transformation? And beneath the gleaming skyline, what hidden costs came with this industrial revolution? The answers lie in a story of power, strategy, and sacrifice, one that changed not just China, but the entire world. China's rise as an industrial powerhouse was not an accident. It was a calculated shift spanning several decades, shaped by economic strategies, political movements, and global influences. However, the path was not always smooth. From economic experiments to political upheavals, each phase of China's industrialization played a crucial role in molding its modern economy. The story begins in 1953, when China initiated its first five-year plan, signaling the start of an ambitious industrial push. Under the leadership of Mao Zedong, the government prioritized heavy industry, believing it was the key to self-sufficiency and global competitiveness. Factories, steel plants, and coal mines became the backbone of the economy, heavily supported by the state. By the late 1950s, however, industrialization took a radical turn with the Great Leap Forward, 1958 to 1960. Mao envisioned an economy that could surpass Western powers in steel production within a few years. Villagers were ordered to build backyard furnaces, aiming to produce steel at unprecedented rates. But this strategy backfired. Instead of industrial progress, it led to inefficient production and a devastating famine, causing millions of deaths. Recognizing the failure, China shifted towards balanced economic development in the 1960s. However, political instability, especially during the Cultural Revolution, 1966 to 1976, disrupted industrial growth. Factories were caught in political struggles, skilled professionals were sidelined, and economic output suffered. Despite these setbacks, by 1978, China had laid down the fundamental infrastructure for future industrial expansion, albeit inefficiently. The turning point came in 1978, when Deng Xiaoping rose to power and initiated sweeping economic reforms. Unlike Mao, Deng opened China to the global market, emphasizing private enterprise, foreign investment, and economic liberalization. A crucial move was the establishment of Special Economic Zones, SEZs, starting with Shenzhen in 1980. These zones operated under different economic rules, allowing foreign businesses to invest and manufacture with tax incentives. The result? A rapid increase in industrial production and technological transfer from Western firms. The government also encouraged the growth of township and village enterprises, TVEs, small, privately owned manufacturing businesses in rural areas. These TVEs contributed significantly to industrial output, increasing their share from 9.9% to 43.2% between 1978 and 2006. This decentralized industrialization model prevented the overburdening of urban centers while creating millions of jobs in rural regions. By the 1990s, China had fully embraced export-led growth, producing everything from textiles to electronics for global markets. The country became the world's leading manufacturer in various sectors, all while maintaining a controlled socialist system that prevented complete market liberalization. As China entered the 21st century, the focus returned to heavy industry. Local governments aggressively invested in large-scale infrastructure projects, including highways, bridges, and power plants. The result? The proportion of heavy industry in total industrial output increased from 53.8% in 1999 to 71.8% in 2012. Simultaneously, China invested heavily in technology and innovation, developing its own industrial brands and reducing reliance on foreign technology. The government's Made in China 2025 initiative aims to transition China from a low-cost manufacturing hub to a global leader in high-tech industries, including robotics, AI, and biotechnology. Today, China is responsible for nearly 20% of global manufacturing output, solidifying its position as the world's factory. However, this success has come at a cost: environmental degradation, income inequality, and increasing political tensions with global economies. China's industrial rise wasn't just about factories and production lines. It was a carefully managed process, orchestrated by a powerful state apparatus. Unlike many Western economies that followed a free market approach, China's industrialization was led by state policies, strategic planning, and strict governance. This unique model helped China avoid economic instability while ensuring long-term growth. Unlike many developing nations that struggled with economic instability, China's industrial boom was heavily influenced by government control. The ruling Communist Party of China, CPC, played a central role in deciding which industries to promote, how investments should be distributed, and what direction the economy should take. One of the most powerful tools used by the government was its 5-year plans, a strategy inspired by the Soviet model but adapted to China's unique needs. Since 1953, China has implemented 12 5-year plans, each outlining national industrial priorities. For example, the first 5-year plan, 1953 to 1957, focused on building heavy industry with the support of the Soviet Union. The second 5-year plan, 1958 to 1962, which included the Great Leap Forward, attempted an aggressive expansion but ended in disaster. However, later plans successfully introduced market reforms, private businesses, and technological development. Through this state-directed planning, China avoided the economic mismanagement that plagued many post-colonial economies, ensuring industrial growth even in difficult times. China's industrialization wasn't just a central government effort. Local governments played a massive role too. Unlike in many Western democracies where cities and provinces operate independently, in China, provincial governments were given incentives to compete for industrial growth. How did this competition work? The government introduced a unique performance evaluation system where local officials were promoted based on economic success rather than political loyalty. A province that attracted more factories, created more jobs, and increased its GDP would see its leaders rewarded with promotions. This fueled massive infrastructure projects, industrial parks, and incentives for businesses to set up factories. This interprovincial competition helped China industrialize faster than many expected, as regional governments raced to outperform each other in attracting investment and developing industries. Unlike the Soviet Union, which collapsed due to rapid economic changes, China adopted a gradual reform strategy that allowed it to transition smoothly from a planned economy to a market-driven one. One of the most important reforms was the introduction of special economic zones, SEZs, in the early 1980s. These SEZs, starting with Shenzhen, Zhuhai, and Xiamen, allowed private businesses, foreign investments, and market-driven economic policies to thrive. By experimenting with capitalism in a controlled way, China avoided the economic collapse that other socialist states faced. Additionally, China's government made sure that state-owned enterprises, SOEs, weren't completely dismantled. While the private sector grew, key industries like energy, banking, and heavy manufacturing remained under state control, ensuring economic stability. This mix of state control and market freedom created the perfect balance, allowing industrial growth while maintaining political and economic order. China's unique industrialization model was deeply tied to its political system. Unlike democratic nations, where policies change with elections, China's one-party system ensured a consistent long-term strategy. The Communist Party of China, CPC, played an active role in shaping economic policy, avoiding short-term political pressures that often disrupt industrialization in other nations. This strong political structure, combined with state planning and local competition, made China's industrial rise one of the most well-managed economic transformations in history. Industrialization doesn't happen in isolation. It requires raw materials, labor, and financial resources. In China's case, the early stages of industrialization were deeply tied to agriculture. Before the factories came, the fields provided not just food, but also the economic backbone for industrial growth. For centuries, China's economy was overwhelmingly agrarian, with the vast majority of its population engaged in farming. But in the years following the Communist Revolution in 1949, the government recognized that industrialization couldn't succeed without first strengthening agriculture. A strong agricultural sector was necessary to feed the workforce, provide surplus capital for investment, and free up labor for industry. In the 1950s, the state introduced collective farming, hoping to increase production through large-scale, state-controlled agricultural projects. However, the rigid system led to inefficiencies, and by the time of the Great Leap Forward, agriculture was struggling under unrealistic production targets. The devastating famine that followed was a stark reminder that without stable agriculture, industrialization would collapse. The turning point came in 1978, when China shifted from collective farming to the household responsibility system. This reform allowed farmers to own their output, sell their surplus in markets, and make independent decisions about what to grow. As a result, agricultural productivity soared, and for the first time, China had food security. This increase in agricultural output created a crucial surplus, which the government redirected into industrial expansion. With more food available and higher rural incomes, something remarkable happened. Millions of rural workers moved into industry. By the early 1980s, the government encouraged the growth of township and village enterprises, TVES. These were small-scale manufacturing businesses located in rural areas, producing textiles, tools, and construction materials. Unlike traditional state-owned enterprises, TVEs were run by local communities and private entrepreneurs, allowing them more flexibility and innovation. The rise of TVEs provided two major advantages. First, they absorbed surplus rural labor, preventing mass migration to overcrowded cities. Second, they helped spread industrialization beyond major urban centers, ensuring that rural regions also benefited from economic growth. Between 1978 and 2006, the contribution of rural enterprises to total industrial growth jumped from 9.9% to 43.2%, demonstrating their critical role in China's industrial boom. Another key factor in China's industrialization was the low cost of labor, which was made possible by stable agricultural production. Unlike many industrialized nations where food prices were high, China's food prices remained low due to high agricultural output. This meant that wages in industrial jobs could stay lower, making Chinese products cheaper and more competitive in global markets. By the 1990s, as rural industries thrived, millions of farmers transitioned to industrial jobs in growing cities. The mass migration of rural workers to urban centers created a massive labor force for factories, fueling China's rise as the world's leading manufacturer. At the same time, the government strategically invested in rural infrastructure, building roads, electricity networks, and irrigation systems to support both agriculture and industry. China's industrial success was never just about factories. It was built on a foundation of agricultural stability, rural entrepreneurship, and a carefully managed transition of labor. The ability to mobilize its rural workforce without causing social and economic chaos remains one of the most remarkable aspects of China's industrial rise. Industrialization is not just about mass production. It's about evolving from low-value manufacturing to high-tech industries. China's rise as an industrial giant wasn't just driven by cheap labor and abundant resources. It was fueled by strategic investments in technology, innovation, and workforce development. While the early years relied on copying foreign designs and attracting foreign investment, China gradually built its own industrial expertise, making it a global leader in advanced manufacturing. In the late 20th century, China understood that industrial success depended on technological advancements. While other developing countries struggled to move beyond basic manufacturing, China took a different approach. The government made it a national priority to acquire and absorb foreign technology, allowing Chinese industries to leapfrog decades of research and development, R&D. This was done through joint ventures with foreign companies, where China insisted that foreign firms share their knowledge in exchange for access to its massive market. Foreign direct investment, FDI, played a major role in China's technology upgrade. By the 1990s, China had become the largest recipient of FDI in the world, attracting multinational corporations in electronics, automotive, and heavy industry. These foreign investments didn't just bring money. They brought expertise, training, and advanced machinery. Over time, China's state-owned enterprises, SOEs, and private firms adapted and improved upon these foreign technologies, transforming themselves into industry leaders. A key part of China's industrial strategy was investing in education and workforce training. Unlike many industrialized nations that relied on an imported workforce, China focused on developing its own human capital. The government expanded technical schools, vocational training centers, and universities to create a highly skilled workforce. In the 1980s, only a small percentage of Chinese students pursued engineering or technical degrees. By the 2000s, China was producing millions of engineers and scientists each year, surpassing most Western nations. The Chinese government also pushed for innovation by supporting domestic companies in key industries. By the early 2000s, China had launched initiatives like Made in China 2025, aiming to dominate high-tech sectors such as robotics, artificial intelligence, AI, semiconductors, and biotechnology. The goal was clear. China didn't want to just assemble foreign products. It wanted to design and manufacture the world's next generation of technology. Despite this progress, China faced a challenge: how to transition from labor-intensive manufacturing to high-tech industries without losing its competitive edge. The answer lay in automation and digital transformation. Today, China leads in industrial robotics, with thousands of factories integrating AI and automated systems to increase efficiency while reducing labor costs. This shift is visible in industries like automobile manufacturing, electronics, and pharmaceuticals, where Chinese companies now compete directly with American, European, and Japanese firms. Another factor that helped China stay ahead was its massive investment in research and development, R&D. Over the past 2 decades, China's R&D spending has skyrocketed, reaching 2.4% of its GDP in 2020, a figure comparable to that of the United States. The government has funded state-led innovation hubs, technology parks, and national laboratories, fostering breakthroughs in fields like quantum computing, aerospace, and green energy. At the same time, China maintained tight control over strategic industries, ensuring that critical sectors like telecommunications, aerospace, and defense remained under state influence. Unlike Western economies where private companies lead innovation, in China, state-owned enterprises work closely with private firms and universities, creating a unique model of government-backed industrial growth. China's commitment to technology and workforce development didn't just transform its industrial sector, it reshaped the global economy. Today, Chinese companies like Huawei, BYD, and Lenovo compete directly with Western tech giants, proving that China is no longer just a manufacturing hub, but a leader in technological innovation. However, this rapid technological rise has also led to tensions with global powers. Countries like the United States and Europe have accused China of intellectual property theft, forced technology transfers, and unfair trade practices. This has resulted in trade wars, sanctions, and restrictions on Chinese companies in key markets. Despite these challenges, China's strategy has proven effective. By combining foreign technology with domestic innovation, investing in education, and promoting research-driven industries, China has successfully transitioned from a low-cost manufacturer to a high-tech powerhouse. The country's next challenge is clear. Can it sustain this momentum and lead the world in the next industrial revolution? Industrialization transformed China into a global powerhouse, but progress came at a price. Beneath the gleaming skyscrapers and booming factories, the nation faced severe environmental damage, social inequalities, and economic imbalances. While China's industrial expansion lifted hundreds of millions out of poverty, it also exacted a heavy toll on its land, air, and people. One of the most pressing consequences of rapid industrialization has been environmental degradation. China's economy depended heavily on coal, steel, and chemical industries, all of which contributed to massive pollution. By the early 2000s, China had become the world's largest carbon emitter, producing more than 28% of global CO2 emissions. Factories spewed toxic fumes into the air, leading to dangerously high levels of particulate matter, PM 2.5, in major cities. Smog became a regular phenomenon, with Beijing, Shanghai, and Guangzhou experiencing hazardous air quality days. Water pollution was another crisis. 70% of China's rivers and lakes became contaminated due to industrial waste dumping. Rivers like the Yangtze and Yellow River, once lifelines for agriculture and drinking water, became toxic due to heavy metal runoff from mining and industrial zones. Cancer villages, where entire communities suffered from industrial pollution-related illnesses, began emerging in China's rural areas, highlighting the severe health consequences of unchecked industrial growth. Land degradation also took its toll. The demand for industrial expansion devoured farmland, forcing many rural communities to relocate. From 1985 to 1994, more than 432 billion RMB, 70 billion USD, was extracted from agriculture through taxes and land requisitioning. As industrial zones expanded, urbanization displaced millions of farmers, creating a growing population of landless workers who had no choice but to seek low-wage factory jobs in overcrowded cities. Beyond the environmental impact, China's industrialization also fueled social inequality. While cities like Shenzhen, Guangzhou, and Beijing prospered, rural provinces remained underdeveloped. The gap between urban and rural incomes widened dramatically, with city dwellers earning 3 times more than their rural counterparts by the 2010s. Migrant workers, who formed the backbone of China's industrial labor force, lived under harsh conditions with limited access to healthcare, education, and social security benefits. The hukou system, a residency permit policy, made matters worse. Rural workers migrating to cities were classified as temporary residents, denying them access to government services. Even after spending years working in industrial centers, many found themselves locked out of permanent housing, medical care, and educational opportunities for their children. This deepened class divisions, leading to rising worker protests and labor strikes across industrial hubs. China's dependence on low-cost labor also led to exploitative working conditions. Reports of overworked and underpaid factory workers became common, with 14-hour shifts, unsafe working environments, and extreme production quotas. Scandals like the Foxconn suicides in 2010, where multiple workers at Apple's supplier factories took their own lives due to unbearable conditions, exposed the dark side of China's industrial success. While industrialization brought economic prosperity, it also made China vulnerable to economic shocks. The country became overly reliant on exports, particularly to the United States and Europe. Any slowdown in global demand had immediate consequences for millions of Chinese workers. The 2008 financial crisis, for instance, led to widespread layoffs and factory closures, forcing the government to intervene with stimulus packages to prevent economic collapse. Recognizing these challenges, the Chinese government has taken steps to mitigate the costs of industrialization. In the past decade, China has invested heavily in renewable energy, becoming the world's largest producer of solar and wind power. Stricter environmental regulations have been implemented, forcing industries to reduce emissions and adopt cleaner technologies. Cities have expanded public transportation networks to cut down on vehicle pollution, and coal consumption has been gradually reduced in favor of natural gas and nuclear energy. Social policies have also improved. The hukou system has been relaxed, allowing more migrant workers to settle in cities permanently. Minimum wages have been increased, and labor protections have been strengthened. However, despite these reforms, challenges remain. China is still dealing with the long-term consequences of rapid industrialization, including aging infrastructure, economic disparities, and environmental damage that could take decades to reverse. As China looks to the future, it faces a critical question: can it sustain its industrial success while addressing the deep-rooted issues caused by its rapid expansion? The country stands at a crossroads, balancing economic growth with environmental sustainability, technological advancement with social equity, and global leadership with domestic stability. China's industrialization offers valuable lessons for other developing nations. Its success was not just about cheap labor or foreign investment, but a strategic combination of state planning, agricultural reforms, technological advancement, and controlled market liberalization. While no country can replicate China's exact model, there are key takeaways for those seeking industrial growth. One major lesson is the role of the state in guiding industrialization. Unlike many nations that relied entirely on free markets, China maintained strong government intervention through policies like 5-year plans, special economic zones, SEZs, and infrastructure investments. This helped overcome initial barriers that many developing countries face, such as lack of capital, weak industries, and underdeveloped infrastructure. Another crucial factor was agriculture's role in fueling industrialization. China ensured food security, freed up labor for industry, and used agricultural surplus to fund early industrial projects. Many developing nations still struggle with industrialization because they fail to strengthen their agricultural base first. Technology and education were also key. China didn't just rely on foreign expertise, it invested heavily in research, technical education, and local innovation. This allowed it to move beyond low-cost manufacturing into high-tech industries, making it globally competitive. However, China's industrial rise also came with costs, pollution, social inequality, and dependence on exports. Developing countries must avoid these pitfalls by implementing sustainable policies from the beginning, balancing economic growth with environmental protection and worker welfare. China's industrialization is a story of ambition, strategic planning, and resilience. In just a few decades, it transformed from an agrarian economy to the world's largest manufacturing hub. Yet, its journey was not without challenges. Economic shifts, environmental crises, and social struggles all tested its path. Now, as China transitions towards a more sustainable, tech-driven future, its industrial legacy remains a blueprint for nations seeking to escape poverty and build a modern economy. The question remains, who will be the next to rise, and will they learn from China's triumphs and mistakes?